And instead, it's a really good tip is instead of saying everything you have, all your material needs to be translated, hire me. Please, please, please hire me. I'm the perfect person, right? That's kind of a turnoff. But what the more clever translators, and there are also small boutique firms that I've coached that now do this successfully, is they'll tell the client, convince me that needs to be translated, right? And sometimes what they'll discover with the client is that there are some documents that are very image sensitive that do need to be professionally translated. And there's certain documents that do not need to be professionally translated. So I would say lots of translators I know who are doing well are really, doing exceedingly well during the age of AI because they're bundling services. And why is this valuable? It's not just because the client gets more stuff. It's the fact that the client gets more value because they can go to one person who's able to give them more of what they need. So it makes their life simpler to have one service provider, one brief. Maybe AI can be your opportunity to take that course, create that first video or that first blog, do that thing that you love doing and just see if your existing translation clients might be interested. There are translators who do text format or graphic design. There are translators who do websites. They actually like creating the website. So I would say lots of translators I know who are doing well are really, doing exceedingly well during the age of AI because they're bundling services.
Hi everyone. I'm Daniela, and this is the Translation Podcast, a space where we can learn, share, and grow together. Please subscribe and like the show. It will help me grow and keep this content for the community. Let's get started. Hi everyone, welcome to the Translation Podcast. This is episode 11, and I'm so excited to have you. My guest today is Joaquim Lépine. Joe, born in Belgium and raised in the United States, now based in Quebec, Joe found his calling in translation after taking a course on a whim. Since then, he's built a career translating for top clients worldwide, teaching at Université de Sherbrooke for over 15 years, and training organizations like NATO, the UN, and the European Commission. He's now the co-founder of Lion Translation Academy and the author of the international bestseller, AI Resilient, a guide to thriving as a freelancer in the age of AI. I met Joe online during one of his many talks. This one was hosted by Pros, and I felt so inspired by his presentation. I also read his newest book, which I strongly advise you to do. It was really insightful. We're very thrilled to have you today, Joe. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Daniela. The honor is all mine. I'm thrilled to be here with you.
Amazing. Thank you. Joe, so you're an educator, keynote speaker, founder of Lion Translations, and co-founder of Lion Translation Academy. How has your personal journey shaped the ideas in teaching and talking about AI in translation?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's I suppose it's kind of a winding path that's brought me where I am today. But I focus a lot today on how to succeed as a freelancer in the age of AI. And I feel like AI gives us new capabilities sometimes. It also sort of makes us realize sometimes, or it's like it holds up a mirror and it makes us realize that we need to improve certain aspects of our marketing and our ability to sell ourselves. So those are sort of like the topics I'm interested in. And the way I came to all of this is, maybe it's going to sound a little bit random, but when I started out my career, I was a super shy person. I'm still a shy person, outside of my work life, mostly keep to myself. But essentially, for me, translation was not my first career. I had been a high school teacher and a yoga instructor. And at that point, when I discovered translation, there was a point where I realized, hey, I love what I'm doing. I've got my degree in translation. I've gone back to school. I've recreated my life. I love this work. It's so great, but it pays so little. And I kind of realized, like if I'm going, my mindset was, if I'm going back to school, if I'm starting my life over and one day I want to have a family, I want to have even a house, God forbid I should have a house, then I want to make a good living doing it. And so at some point I had to recognize like, hey, I'm pretty bad at marketing. I'm a total introvert. I'm pretty bad at talking to people. I have a lot of struggles with communicating in certain contexts and networking and all this stuff. And I started hiring business coaches to help me with the skills I didn't have. so that I could advance my career and start to get more of the kinds of clients that I dreamed of having, and daring to charge what I was worth. Daring to go after those great clients that I wanted and know how to do a proper pitch and all those kinds of things. So essentially, like, what I do today is born out of struggle. It's born out of, a complete of lack of knowledge of marketing and how to be successful and all this stuff. And I sort of made it my mission. And I thought, there's got to be a way that even a shy dude like me can learn to market effectively and have a successful career as a translator. And so, I started to compile stuff that I did enjoy in marketing, because we often hear about sort of the extrovert, like very flashy, very salesy types of marketing, right? Where it's all about like impressing people. It's all about being loud. It's about having your face everywhere. But I discovered that there's this whole undercurrent of marketing that can be very effective and actually kind of fun, because it's more about building relationships. And so I sort of became fascinated with this at some point, and I started to put together resources. Eventually, between teaching that and teaching other things, I realized I had enough material to not only teach through other organizations, which I love to do, but I could maybe even create my own platform. And so in 2022, with Anne-Marie Boulanger, we put together our small training platform for translators. So it's a professional development platform. And we do teach language translation. So we teach into English translation, so professional development. We also have courses on the tech side of things. We talk about tools, cat tools, productivity stuff. And of course, today we're talking a lot about AI. But really, my main focus today is on value, how we can communicate value so that we can have highly successful careers. So not just I translate or I interpret, but I make a great living doing what I do. What I do is important. Being able to communicate that to clients. And then part of that is also convincing ourselves that we're important, because it took me a long time to believe in my own worth. And so I really, really believe in what I do today. Like, if I manage to build up a very successful translation business, I know that anyone can, if they have like a little bit of knowledge of how business and marketing and sales work. Sales is not a bad word. There's a lot of great sales stuff out there, but there is a way you can do it that's integral, that feels good, that is more relationship focused. I teach a lot about social selling and about warming up your audience before you make pitches and things like that. So essentially, that's sort of a long-winded answer, but I came to teaching the business of translation because I was really bad at it. And I had to learn from scratch and cobble together solutions that felt good and that actually worked. And that's what I love to teach today.
I love that. So many things to unpack there, and I feel that I resonate with so many things that you said, and I think a lot of the translators and interpreters listening to us resonate with what you said. I have two questions on top of that, if I may. When we talk about marketing, especially nowadays, from your extensive experience and also coaching translators worldwide, what would you say the main one or two takeaways are this year in marketing? What would you advise translators to do?
Well, my sense, for what it's worth, is that AI, again, it's sort of revealing certain places where we haven't quite caught up to other professions. So let me give you a really down-to-earth example. When I started with my current financial planner, I have a financial advisor, planner, whatever you want to call him. And when I met him way back in the day, I think it was like the late 2000s, for goodness sake, or maybe the early 2010s. But essentially, he was recommended to me. And then when I got in touch with him, he was like, sure, we could talk about your situation and see if we might be a fit. When's a good time for you? I'll come to your house. And so he came to my house wearing a suit and tie and sat down, and we shook hands, and he asked me about the neighborhood where I was living, and started saying like, oh, you have such a cute cat, and like, this is a cool area. It's kind of neat how they're developing this and that. And we talked like humans, which is kind of mind blowing, because like, people in other fields are trained to do this. This is a learnable skill. Sitting down and having a conversation, and it's called establishing a business relationship. You break the ice, you build a relationship with a person before you start talking business. And because he took the time to get to know me, he was interested in me as a person. He presented himself as a professional. He was confident. I trusted him. And that relationship of trust has literally now lasted over a decade, maybe close to 2 decades. And so when I'm asked where are we at, or where's the challenge for us in marketing? It's not that we are inherently bad or anything is wrong with us. We're actually, I think that translators and interpreters are much better than they think they are at marketing most of the time. But the thing is that we haven't gone through the training. So financial advisors are trained on how to have a sales call. They're trained on how to establish a relationship with a client. They're trained on these things. It's part of their training. And people who open all kinds of different firms in the other knowledge professions are also trained on the basics of how to run a business, on how to have different touch points in your marketing that are going to build further trust, how to follow up and retarget and all these things. And it's part of their training. It would be unthinkable in many professions to not have some basic training on how to do marketing and how to do sales. But in translation, it's never really been part of the curriculum, and this is not at all to cast blame. I think universities have their hands full, and more than ever, that's true because they also now have to contend with AI and see how to address that in the classroom. So we can't just foist this on universities and say like, hey, you should be teaching sales and marketing. I'm just saying that there hasn't really been like a standard way to get the training that we need to be where other knowledge professions already are. And so I think that because AI makes clients sometimes think that they don't need a professional translator or a professional interpreter. They see ads everywhere on Facebook saying like, get your one-click translator, or translate in one click. I literally saw an ad. I should have screenshotted it. I was shocked to see this on Facebook. They were saying, don't hire an interpreter, buy our app. That was literally the message right on the screen. And it's kind of shocking, right? For us, because we really care about the quality of our work. But my point is that like, in the AI world, clients really need to understand the value that we bring more than before. So where we already had certain shortcomings, that's being even revealed more because it's like we're starting to see this divergent market where you have premium translators who are very good at marketing and sales, who have the skills, who are in a minority, and their business is doing this. Like I know a lot of translators are doing great today and they're just getting more and more work and it's more high paid and they're not having a problem today. But then you also see that the mid-market is shrinking. And we see that translators who were struggling before, who did not really do any sales or marketing, who relied maybe on a handful of agencies, and I love agencies. I have nothing against them inherently. I'm just saying that if you built your whole career without learning that marketing and sales piece, that's fine. But in the age of AI, where a lot of agencies are not offering conditions that are enabling translators to make a good living, it's like it's really holding up a mirror. It's making us realize like, hey, maybe there's some stuff that we need to learn. And so my whole thing is like, we don't need to go way out into left field to learn this. We can simply look to other professions. You can say, hey, how do accountants build up relationships with clients? That's interesting. Okay, they asked me to come to their office and we sit down and they talk about the weather. Oh, okay. I wonder why I've never done that with a translation client. So it's like when I wrote AI Resilient, part of my goal was to say, hey, what are some simple, even fun things to do? It can be fun. It doesn't have to be serious, but what are some simple things that I can do to start borrowing techniques from other professions that have been in existence for longer as regulated professions in many cases? They've had more time to figure out how to build successful businesses and, figure out the different touch points and like ways of nurturing relationships with clients. What are some simple things we can borrow from them and start gradually incorporating into translation so that we can come up to level and start to be very confident in our relationships and charge what we're worth and help clients feel great about hiring us?
I love that. And you anticipated my next question. I was just about to ask you, what was your inspiration for your AI Resilient book? And on top of the question that I asked before, there is something very important that you said: personal development and being confident in yourself and in the services you offer, which goes beyond acquiring those business skills, negotiation skills, marketing skills, and so on. Can you talk to us a little about that and how translators can build the confidence they need?
Absolutely. Well, I'll be perfectly transparent and tell you that for me personally, the process I went through, and I had very low self-esteem when I was younger. Okay. I, I basically at some point, I think it was the original impetus might have been like a Tony Robbins book where he said, if you don't know how to do something, you're not very good at something, find someone who's doing exactly what you want to do or someone who has those skills and see if you can study with them, And so even when I didn't have a lot of money, I always invested in a business coach. And very early on, I started seeing results and I started saying, hey, sometimes I don't believe in myself, but look, there's one person who does. And speaking with that one person, having that regular contact to bring me a little further, to help me dare to just take this one small step today, or reach out to one client, or doing one meeting with one client in person, or whatever, those small steps start to build that self-confidence. But for me, it was both. It was having a business coach who helped me to grow. That's why I'm a big proponent of business coaching today. It's so helpful to have someone you can grow with. And then the second piece is taking small actions. I call it baby steps. Like in my Speak to Roar eight-week program for translators, I don't have anyone take sudden leaps. It's not like, you've never spoken at a conference before, but you're going to do a client-side conference in front of 1,000 people and talk about something that you barely know. It's like, no. Or the whole way I did it is baby steps. It's like, where am I now? And what small thing can I do today that's going to help me build a little confidence? What small thing can I do in the next couple of months? And to give just one example of this, for me, I found it very difficult to teach at first because I'm a shy person. I was diagnosed with social anxiety disorder as a teenager. I was very shut down. I spoke when I was spoken to, but I was a really quiet and kind of low self-esteem person in my teen years. It's the baby steps, right? So it's like I started to take small steps, and the small steps build confidence. So the way that I learned public speaking, like today I regularly speak in front of all kinds of groups, and I'm not nervous. And when I do have nerves, I convert it into good energy. So it's not a concern that I have doing public speaking. But the way that I built that skill essentially is that I literally started off having one student. So when I was going back to school, the university was looking for English instructors, and they said, hey, is there anyone who'd like to give English lessons here? Because here in Quebec, there aren't that many native Anglophones, a lot of Francophone people. And so I was like, okay, maybe I could teach to one person. Maybe I could do that. So I took one student and did like individual lessons. And then that helped me feel like, hey, that went pretty well. I think I might be able to do that again. And then they came back and they said, hey, would you be comfortable having two? I was like, oh my God, two? That's like twice as many people. I was nervous, but I did it. I was like, okay, I'm nervous, but this is a small step. I can do this. I can work up to two. And then it became three. And then after three, they said, would you like to do a conversation group for people in the university union that need to brush up on their English? And I kind of thought it over, and I thought, okay, if it's small groups and, it's low key and, the expectations aren't too high, then maybe I could do a small group. So I taught a small group. And then gradually, after I had my master's degree, I was offered like actual courses, university courses. And the first ones that I took were small. I think there were 10 or 20 students. And then I worked my way up, and at my high point in my university teaching years, I had around 50 students, at least in some of my classes that had, larger numbers. But I built that up gradually. And so, because the last thing you want to do is try to build up your self-confidence by doing something way outside of your comfort zone. Because if it doesn't go well, then you're sort of going to prove to yourself that you can't do it, So that's why I'm a big believer in taking baby steps that are like, hey, that went pretty well. I think I'm actually kind of proud of myself. That was cool. I think maybe I could go just a little further next time. And that's how I became confident doing public speaking. And of course, I also took courses to work on my own public speaking skills. And I had the help of my business coach to walk me through a lot of the skills that I had to learn. But bottom line, it's been a process of baby steps. And that's exactly what I teach when I work with translators and interpreters as a coach myself. It's like, what's the small thing we can do together this week that's going to make you start to believe in yourself? Because I already believe in them. But for translators who work with me, it's like the journey is for them to start to see all the greatness that they have within. And so it's kind of like I'm giving them the energy of like, I believe in you. I know you can do this. And they're starting to take small steps. And by the end of the course, they're like, oh my God, like I took one small step after another. And, like I literally have a student in Speak to Roar send a testimonial that I put this up the other day. And she said, like, I now believe that I am premium. Like I'm worth it. I'm worth paying a premium rate. And that was a journey for me. And I'm like, that just makes me feel like $1 million because that's exactly what I love to do, is to help people to realize that they're great. And sometimes it's like they need someone else to believe in them, which is totally legit. I needed someone, and then they have to take small actions that will enable them to see it for themselves.
I love that. Small incremental steps that took you, Joe, to speak today in front of thousands of translators, right? So
absolutely,
that's amazing. Very, very inspiring. And I love how you shared your story. Thank you for being vulnerable and for inspiring so many of us. Great. So speaking about your Book, I just wanted to ask if you can give us a few takeaways from the book. If you can tell us in a nutshell what the book is about, and what are the key takeaways that we can take from it.
Right on. So it's funny because AI is in the title, like you can't really miss AI, but it's not a book about AI per se. It's more about how can not just translators, but all freelancers, self-employed people like coaches as well, different service providers, how can we make clients realize that it's worth hiring us when they could use an AI tool? And it's super important to understand that we're not alone because our field is just one field among many that's impacted by AI. The other day, I was doing a training course where I was speaking as part of the webinar series, the Masters of AI, where they're helping coaches today know how to talk to coaching clients about AI because people can just go to an AI business coach. There are tons of AI business coaches out there. There are free ones, there are paid ones, but people didn't get into coaching typically to like just clone themselves in an app, right? They like to work with people, at least some of them. And so we're not alone. And other fields too are very much impacted by AI. So my thought was, let's put together some things that have really worked for me, like a no fluff book. That's why it's short. It's about 160 pages. And my intent was not to write a treatise, but a helpful series of tips and things that are proven because I've done them myself. I've seen my coaching clients do them and they've helped them to make clients aware of what they get when they work with them. Because often we know what we do. So we develop tacit knowledge around our subject area. So we know all the value we bring. But for the client, they often know next to nothing about translation. And so they don't understand why they should hire a human rather than AI, let alone pay a premium price. In many cases, they'll be shocked when they learn that it's not free. It's like, this costs something? Then you tell them how much it costs. And then they're like, they're jumping out of their seat and going like, oh my God, this is outrageous. But that's because we haven't always helped them to understand the value that they get. And there are many ways that we can do that. One of the most important that I do with all leads, so interested potential clients who have expressed interest, who have knocked on my door, they're maybe interested in a translation, maybe they sent me a text, they're asking for a quote. So one of the things that I talk about in the book is the importance of meeting with your clients. Meet with your clients. For the pandemic, it would have been weird to say, hey, let's meet on Zoom for 5 minutes to talk about this interpreting assignment or this translation assignment. Yeah, that would have been weird, right? No one was doing that. I literally met with my clients in person for the pandemic. If you can believe that, I'd go and have coffee with them or I'd invite them to lunch. And I still do that. In fact, I'm inviting a client of mine to lunch after this call. I'm literally going to pick him up. We're going to his favorite restaurant. So I still do a lot of these things. But the point is that after the pandemic, it's totally normal for any service provider to say like, oh, thank you so much for your email. I'd love to jump on a 5-minute call just to understand your needs better and make sure I give you an accurate quote so I can best help you, right? That's totally normal. It's not weird to do. And this is one of many simple but effective reflexes we can start to develop is simply getting off of email. Get off email. That era where you could have, and I've been there, like I've been translating for almost 20 years. So I've got the t-shirt, I've been there. I used to just do everything by email. I had a Hotmail address when I started out. For me, it was a big step to get like a really bad website with just like a picture of me and email address. So I've been through the different stages, but the point is that today, I think it's very important to get up to level simply by meeting with clients. And then when you meet with them, you ask them questions. So this is one of the wonderful things I love teaching people is that if you're an introvert like me, it doesn't have to be this pushy call. And I've been on really pushy sales calls where like, if you say, for example, I'm going to think about it, then they're like, oh, let's explore that deeper. And then they start to knock down your objections and try to like force sell you on the spot. It's so uncomfortable, right? It's so awful and cringe. But my point is that you don't have to do that. And my favorite technique when I meet with clients, of course, I have scripts that I teach to translators in my courses. But what I would tell everyone who's listening to this call is simply, if you're an introvert like me, ask them questions. And when I say questions, I mean open-ended questions, like things that don't require a yes or a no, but a little bit of development. Because when you ask open-ended questions, first of all, it takes the spotlight off of you if you're not comfortable being on camera, if you're not comfortable like being the center of attention, as many of us aren't in this field, at least in my experience. So it puts the spotlight on them. And also that's going to build a lot of trust because a lot of people, believe it or not, they don't feel heard. They don't feel seen. Maybe you're talking to a coordinator at a major institution and they feel like their boss doesn't listen to them. And maybe they go home and they feel like their spouse doesn't listen to them. And their kids sure as hell don't listen to them, right? So it's actually a huge gift to meet with a potential or existing client and to ask them open-ended questions and just to actually listen. So this is one of the simplest techniques you can put into practice. Don't worry too much about being perfect. It's not actually about you. People will feel like you're the most amazing service provider in the world if you listen to them and ask them questions that will dig a little bit deeper into like their needs and their desires and what they're looking for and why they're passionate about their project. And so there's so many more techniques we could dive into, but essentially the core premise of the book is that in the age of AI, we need to build trust, and we're going to build that trust through human relationships. And then there are many different permutations of that, different channels you can use as well. I even use things like asynchronous videos. I'll send video emails to certain clients. There are so many fun and creative ways that you can start to build relationships. But essentially, if you want like one quick takeaway, it's like, don't use email exclusively. Start to jump online to meet with your clients and don't worry too much about being perfect, about scripting everything you're going to say. Just ask them questions. And you'll see the energy start to change. They're going to really appreciate you. They're going to be amazed because very few translators or interpreters take the time to meet with clients and really ask all those questions. And they will typically remember you. You'll be so much more top of mind. I've often had cases where I did this and ultimately the project didn't go through. Let's say they couldn't afford it. That's happened in many cases. I won't lower my rates to get a job. So that's just my thing. But in many cases, either they recommended me to someone else. So it still paid off spending that time with them, investing that time in getting to know them. Or suddenly 5 years later, I get an email from them saying, hey, we didn't have any funding when we last spoke, but we love your vibe. We think you're the person for this. We appreciate like how you work with people. And today we've got funding and we've got whatever, $20,000 project. Do you want it? And those kinds of things happen to me. They happen to my translation clients, like, or to my coaching clients time and time again. So they're simple and effective methods. And that's the kind of marketing that I love to teach.
I love that. And 2 episodes ago, I was talking with James Christie, who's a British-born interpreter, and he lives in the Reunion Island in the Indian Ocean. And he said the exact same thing. So he said, just meeting, with people and talking to people, from talking to people on the phone to meeting them personally, but also bringing your personal touch, brought him assignments after a few years, right? So even though they in the beginning didn't have the budget, or maybe they went with someone else, right? Which happens a lot, knowing there are so many translators and interpreters out there. But because they liked him so much and they liked the way that he positioned himself, they contacted him back. And those clients are the most loyal clients he has today. So it's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. So going back to your book, I wanted to ask, how do you see translators positioning themselves as irreplaceable when the AI tools are advancing so quickly? And my question is targeted mainly towards the rates, because I don't know if you started to get these questions. I'm sure a lot of people did around, okay, how much does this, translation cost and so on? And keeping in mind that AI is free and there's this misconception that AI can do our job quicker and better. I'm curious, what would you advise translators to do when they get these type of questions, and how to position themselves as irreplaceable?
Right on. Well, there are different ways to position yourself. And I think that there's more than one winning combo. It's going to depend on a few different things. It's going to depend on your market, even your location, your culture, and how clients respond to things. I don't really think that there's one size that fits all, but let me give you a couple of examples of models that are working really well today. And sometimes just like having real down-to-earth models that people are really doing can shed a light on it. So one translator I know who's doing extremely well right now has introduced tiers, quality tiers. So it's like if you want a translation with no mistakes, but it's not necessarily publication quality, you'll have one rate. And if a client wants publication quality, or it's a speech, or it's something that's going to go in an annual report or in a press release that will be shared all over the world, then that's a different rate. And so crucially, this translator that I know who does this, who offers these quality tiers, which by the way, agencies have been doing this since forever, right? At least the late 2010s, they were offering tiers. But today, some freelancers are starting to do it. Some boutique agencies are starting to do it. And it doesn't mean that they're bad. It's a totally viable way forward. But crucially, the person I know who's doing really well with this meets with clients to talk about it. And to talk about, what are your needs? And instead, it's a really good tip is instead of saying everything you have, all your material needs to be translated, hire me, please, please, please hire me. I'm the perfect person, right? That's kind of a turnoff. But what the more clever translators, and there are also small boutique firms that I've coached that now do this successfully, is they'll tell the client, let's do a call. And then on the call, they'll say, well, I'm not sure actually that needs to be translated. Like, convince me that needs to be translated, right? And sometimes what they'll discover with a client is that there are some documents that are very image sensitive that do need to be professionally translated. And there's certain documents that do not need to be professionally translated because they're in-house memos, because they are internal communications, because they're like boilerplate stuff that could actually be translated by AI and simply be reviewed, right? But because they're saying you don't necessarily need a translator for everything, the client trusts them more. It's kind of like going to the dentist. If you go to the dentist and the dentist says you've got a cavity in every single tooth, let's start from scratch. Let's fix all your teeth, right? That's going to sound kind of fishy. You're going to want a second opinion. But if they say, look, you've got like 3 teeth that are starting cavity, but this one I think is going to be all right. So let's just focus on those 2, and that'll cut some money off the bill. How does that sound? Now we're building trust, because they're not just trying to say we have to do everything. They're being strategic. And so translators and agencies are starting to pick up on this. Again, other professions, they're trained on this. They're trained on price benchmarking. They're trained on consumer psychology, but translators are typically not. So this is only catching up. It's just catching up to the other professions. So instead of saying you need everything translated, we can advise clients. So that's what being a partner is. It's not just a name. It's not like, oh, yes, I'm your partner, blah, 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 put the name in your marketing. It's like, we're going to look down at your real needs, and I'm not going to try to convince you to pay for something you don't need. So that's one way that you can effectively build trust. So there are tiers. Other people like me, so I don't do tiers myself, but I tell clients I am the premium option. And here's the proof. And I will literally give them URLs to my published translations. So I'll say, here are 7 URLs to my academic translations that have been published by Routledge. They've been published by the Oxford Journal of this or that. Like, I'll send them the literal URL. I'll be like, here are some of my publications. Feel free to check it out. If you like the style, get back to me. But I don't lower my prices because I'm positioning myself as the premium option. And I'm also backing up my claims. So if I say, yes, I'm a premium option, it's not just like, hey, yeah, I'm premium, I charge a lot. No, it's like, hi, thank you so much for your information query. What I offer is premium services. Here are my publications. You can see if this might be a fit. And if not, no worries. But because I have the receipts, I have those published translations, and I keep those URLs. And there are ways that you can be notified when people start talking about your translations online. There are ways that you can ask clients to acknowledge you in the translation, so your name will appear on Google. So you can keep track of your previous translations and start to use them as leverage. And it just like builds and builds to the point where you can have a very successful business. So I think there's more than one way to do it, but those are 2 ways you can do it, is different tiers of service. Or you could say I'm premium only, but you better have the receipts. If you're saying I'm premium only and I charge the top price, you better be able to prove that your work is premium. So that's where it's helpful to have a portfolio. That's something I do with everyone in my Squeak to Roar course, is everyone builds a premium portfolio. So we go and find their previous translations. We create a visually appealing presentation so that, just like if you were hiring a photographer, right, you'd want to see some pictures they've taken before you hire them. Well, it's the same with translators. Like if you take the time to create a premium portfolio, it can take a day or 2 of work. but it pays massive dividends because you can then back up your claim. So you can say, yep, I'm premium. Here's the proof, basically. Here are what my clients have to say. Here are my testimonials. And sometimes you have to be clever with the testimonials because you can't always mention the client, but that's all like more advanced stuff that I coach translators through. So people, like everyone by the end of the course who has done the work will have their premium portfolio. So I think there's more than one way to position yourself. You can go the premium route. You can have different service tiers. You can also be very highly specialized. And finally, I want to mention to your other question, you were asking like, what do you do when a client basically comes to you and like they're not really willing to pay a premium rate, like specifically in terms of prices? I actually have put together a swipe file of my exact answers to clients in different fields, which basically walks them through a trust building process and helps them understand the value that they get. So if that's something that your listeners are interested in, I'm happy to provide it to you for free. I'll just put it in the show notes so they can go download it if anyone would like to have it. But basically, yeah, like I have a template response for clients who are interested, but who, in some cases are going to say, for example, hey, I've translated my text with DeepL or I've translated my text with Google. Can you just clean it up? And so I have answers ready for that. I'm like, thank you so much for your email. And then, I'll explain to them like what Google is and what a human translation is and what outcome they'll achieve with each one. And so that's gotten me much better results than, being very like getting on my high horse and being insulted, right? Or like being defensive. You don't want to be defensive. I don't think it's necessarily productive, but you can very tactfully point people in the right direction. And going back to self-confidence, stand your ground, right? Whatever you decide to do, you decide to offer tiers or to go all premium or a different approach. It's also about standing true to your values and standing firm and saying like, this is what I accept. This is what I don't accept. And like, okay, it doesn't fit with what you want. No problem. No worries. Like I'll literally say no worries in my emails in many cases. And so I don't, I try not to let it upset me. It's more like some clients are going to test and see if they can use AI themselves. And then it's more just about having a good tactful answer and knowing what we're offering and helping them to understand it.
I love that. And it all goes back to communication. Because the clients who ask you to proofread an AI translated text or ask about it, they don't know how AI is working in translation. So they don't know how to appreciate the quality of a translation. So even getting educated might change their mind. So it's all about communication. Great advice. Hi there. It's Daniela. I'm just jumping in for a moment to remind you to subscribe and like the Translation Podcast. Your support helps more people discover the show and keeps this content available for our community. Now, let's get back to the episode. We talked about communication, so communication skills, which are so important. We talked about active listening. We talked about approaching customers in different ways. I wanted to ask you, Joe, what are some common mistakes freelancers make in this area and how can they fix them?
Right on. Well, I think many answers simply come from, or many issues or challenges come from sticking to email only. When we start to meet with our clients, I find that things start to shift. We start to also understand our own value better sometimes by speaking with them. So that's like my number one thing is start jumping on a call. And it doesn't have to be only prospective clients. It can be your existing clients. For example, I just finished translating a very complex and difficult academic article for a professor, and it was on birth and pregnancy and how it was in the humanities. So it's talking about how these things are understood by society and what options are better for different population segments and stuff like that. And it was a really tough text. Well, I could have just said, I've written a whole bunch of questions in Word, just like answer my questions when you can, and that's great. But instead, what I'll do in those kinds of cases, I'll say, hey, I've gone through your text and I've noted some things. And I will often include the file or include some screenshots. Like there's some tricky passages. I'm not quite sure what you meant here, if it's like A or B. How would you like to jump on a call and just sort this out in like 10 minutes? I found that it's a very effective way to save time for everybody. So there you go. That's another opportunity to build trust. It's not just about the text. It's also about the trust that you're building because you're speaking with them. It's that one-on-one time. And that's going to help you understand their needs better. So maybe on that call, you find out that they also need I'll just throw something out there. Let's say they also need formatting services. It's something that arises that you understand during their call. Well, in the future, you could say, by the way, I can also include formatting services, or there's someone I hire who can do the formatting for your text. Now, this is interesting because you're suddenly offering greater value to your client. And not only that, but it's specific to their situation. So in proper marketing and sales terminology, this is called value-based selling. This is why I personally don't believe on putting my prices up on my website. Because as soon as you put a price up on your website, you're saying it's the same for everybody. What people do in value-based pricing, and this is something that's used in other fields, it's used in architecture, it's used in consulting, it's used in many other fields. When you're value-based, you take the time to understand the other person's needs and you craft a proposal that will directly meet those needs and the outcome that the client wants. So now when you make a proposal, your client is going to be wowed because you took the time to figure out what they need. And even if the price is significantly higher, they'll very, very, very often accept, whether this is in translation or a different field. So all of that came from one tiny decision, which is to meet with the client instead of just shoot emails back and forth. So like the number one mistake, I would say, if you're doing everything with email only, start to meet with your clients. I think that's the number one thing that I would recommend changing right out the gate. And then also, like, I'll give a really cool tip that's helped me a lot with negotiation, because sometimes clients will say, I really want to hire you, but I don't have the money. And it's like breaking our heart because we really would love to do the job. We know that we have just the right background to do that work. And like, so a lot of translators will tell me, yeah, okay, I lowered my price to get the work. And it's like, okay, I guess I'm doing the work that I'm passionate about, so it's sort of okay, even though I'm making very little money with this job. So what I often tell them is, well, in some cases, I'll tell them, take my negotiating course. I have a negotiation course for translators, but one of the things that we look at in that course that I'm very happy to share with you is, what are all the different variables that you could play with in your negotiation with your client? Because maybe they want the translation cheaper, but you can get a concession in return. So for me, for example, like in my case, sometimes clients have said, I really want to hire you, but I just don't have the money. Is there something you can do about the price, right? In other words, can you lower your rate just for me? And I will not do that. But what I will do is I will say, okay, so you're telling me that you want the translation 15% cheaper? No problem. I would just need 15% more time to do it. That way it's not preventing me from taking work from other clients. And there's something, I call that my 15-15 rule. Like if you want it 15% faster, for example, then they have to pay 15% more. This is my 15-15 thing that I use with all my clients now. And there's something about using numbers and aligning those numbers that it clicks in clients' brain and they will get it. And they'll I think every single time I've done this, the client has accepted. Like it's very rare. And there's also good research behind this. So, the Harvard Business Review, for example, has studied the components of trust. And one of the pillars of trust is mutual concessions. So concessions are not bad. It's just that concessions need to be mutual in order to be a win all around and to build further trust. So if my client wants something like a lower rate, sure, I'm open to offering that in exchange for perhaps more time to do the job. Or maybe it'll be in exchange for doing a LinkedIn post about what a great job I did. Now we're talking, because that's very valuable to me. And it's just a few minutes of their time. But if they do a post about what a great job I did, I can then put it in my featured section. I can put it in my project section. It can stay there for years or even decades to come and help to sell my services at a premium rate. So I'm actually getting potentially more value than a few more cents on the dollar for whatever, a medium-sized translation project. And these are just two variables, but in my courses, I cover like a complete menu of variables and examples of how you can leverage them. So these are like two simple things you can do. Start meeting your clients, understanding their needs, offering services that really are tailored to their needs that will position you as premium. And then like accepting the possibility that your client may want a concession, and that's okay, but you too are going to ask for a concession. I will never just offer a concession for nothing. They've got to give me something back, and there are many possibilities, but that's what negotiation, in my book anyway, that's what it's all about. It's not about winning. It's not about crushing the other person. It's not about, Like there are many things that come to mind when you say the word negotiation, but for me, a good negotiation is a win-win. It's like, oh, you want a concession? Cool. Let's look at what you can give me and we'll both concede. And so again, research has shown that when both parties make concessions, it actually builds more trust and it builds businesses very effectively over time. So those are two things that you can do without too much trouble.
I love that. That's great advice. Speaking about seeing AI as a partner and not a threat, it sounds like both our mission is to shift people's mindset around seeing AI as an opportunity. I wanted to ask you, Joe, can you share a few examples on how translators and even small agencies can leverage AI to strengthen their business instead of feeling they are replaced by AI?
Sure, absolutely. I suppose we should start by defining AI. If you sort of look at two broad categories of tools that are used by translators, typically we're talking about NMT and Gen AI. Those are sort of the two buckets, right? So if you're talking about neural machine translation, if you're using DeepL, for example, to help with your first draft, that's adding value to your project. So I'm often asked, like, Joe, how does that add value, like compared to starting from scratch? Well, let's take a concrete example. Let's say that you were able to complete your project overall 15% faster because you used DeepL. Do you think that if your client receives that translation 15% faster, do you think that's worth more to them, or do you think that's worth less to them? It's worth more, right? That's really valuable. Translation is almost always time sensitive. So if you use AI, you don't have to be ashamed of it. If your client ever asks you, you can say, yeah, I use AI. I use the best tools on the market. They're secure. And that means that you get your translation faster at zero extra charge. What other service sector are you ever going to find that in 2025? That's really, really powerful proposition, right? It's going to be hard for them to turn down. And I will tell that to clients in certain cases, and they're really wowed. And they're like, okay, yeah, like I'm really happy to be working with a consummate professional, but all I'm doing is telling them, like, you get value when I use AI. So it doesn't demean value of what I do. It actually raises the value. And by the way, I'm the person who pays for my tools, for the encryption of those tools and my VPN and all the other things that keep my data secure and the client's data secure. I pay for the tool. I pay for training to know how to use those tools. And I will mention that to clients. So rather than being ashamed of AI, I think we can talk about neural machine translation as a value add for the client. They're getting value for free. That's pretty incredible, right? That's pretty hard to find anywhere today. And then the other sort of the corollary to this is generative AI. So we talked about neural machine translation, but if you use generative AI, how can you use that? I do have a number of Gen AI courses that I teach now, but the focus most of the time, tends to be on how can we use it for translation adjacent tasks? Because it's really, really good for those kinds of things. So to give you one example, you can use AI to help with your research. And instead of going to Google and having to go through 10 different websites to try to find really hard to find information, you can use a specialized search tool like perplexity.ai, for example, that's a fact-checked AI, and it's going to crawl the web to find information. And you can even narrow it down to social media. You can narrow down the sources to peer-reviewed academic articles. So suddenly, instead of having to click on 10 different websites and go check and try to find information, I'm getting an aggregation of data that's highly relevant, that's summarized for me with relevant terminology and sources for everything. And that's why I think that generative AI can be really useful for translators and save time on some of the drudgery of things like research and formatting stuff. And so I will readily use it for those purposes. I go actually a step further than that because one of the things I teach people in my training is how to train your AI so that it understands the kinds of things that you do and what kinds of outputs you want. So for example, you can train it to be your translation research assistant, and you tell it what kinds of text you translate and why it's important that you go to, for example, such and such legal terminology websites instead of just using whatever it finds on Reddit. You have to explain that to AI. But if you train your AI and you have different profiles and different spaces where you train your AI, then literally what you can do, like as I'm translating, I'll just pop things in there and I'm like, hey, like, should I use this word or this word? And here's the context. We're discussing this topic. And because I've trained it and it has specific custom instructions, it's going to say, oh, like in my case, it'll say like, okay, the peer review literature tends to use this term 70% of the time, and 30% of the time it'll use this other thing. And here's the context typically that you'll find. That is really valuable information, and it just saves hours and hours of time compared to like going and finding documents and then hitting Control F and then like trying to look through the entire document for contextual clues. So that's just one thing. You can use AI for several purposes, whether it's research, rounding out your ideas and getting proposals, refinement purposes, repurposing content for your social media and things like that. So there are quite a few things that I find are useful, but typically my sense is that the way we add value with generative AI is primarily, for me anyway, is using it for adjacent tasks that it can do more quickly, more effectively than other tools. And here again, it's like, if it's saving me time, that's valuable in itself. And again, if the client ever asks about it, I'm not ashamed. It's like, if they were to go to an architect today, you can darn well be sure their architect is going to use AI to help draw up their blueprint to make sure that they're following codes in their region and all the rest of the stuff, right? A client wouldn't be upset to find that out. They'd be relieved to know that their architect is checking all the right things and making sure that it's true information and that there are credible sources and that they know what they can and cannot do in a given zone in your city, right? So they would expect a professional to know where to find the information. And to me, again, it does not diminish the value of what we do. It only heightens it because we still have to vet everything. We have to check the sources. We still have to use our human judgment, which machines do not have. And so in both cases, I think with NMT and with Gen AI, we're adding value in a variety of ways that are cutting down on tasks that are not directly translation, or they're cutting down on drafting basic stuff, but it's not replacing us. It's just something that is directly benefiting the client, often simply in the form of a faster turnaround. So I'm not ashamed ever to talk to clients about why I use tools and how it's directly benefiting their bottom line.
I couldn't agree more. And I've started recently to train a few generative AIs, part of my PhD research. So I'm researching generative AI in medical translation because I do a lot of medical translations, and it's so powerful. I'm barely starting, so I'm starting to learn how to train the models myself. But I think that if every translator would be able to do this at a smaller scale, it would be so powerful. I mean, even beyond using it for terminology search, for glossary building, for any type of online search, academic search, and so on. Just being able to have your own little model and to customize it depending on your field or fields, if you have many. It is really popular in the legal field. I'm sure you saw that there are so many AI for the legal field, both in translation nowadays, because there's so much corpus of data that is available.
Right.
And it is not that complicated to train the model to remember everything. And it's not, without an AI, without a tool, it is so complicated to do that online research, because the terminology is so different. Like I translate generally from the Romanian language into, it can be English UK, it can be English US, it can be Canada, and so on. So every country has its own terminology, so it's not that easy when you compare the versions and you're really confused. So it can be so powerful. But just to go one step back, Joe, because we're not all at the same level. Some of us are barely starting to use AI, some not, because they have been so overwhelmed about it. AI has, if we reflect, I remember 12 months ago, I was during my first episode with Sarah Tiemann, who's an experienced German to English interpreter, and same as you, a business coach. We were talking about AI, and it was barely starting. Nowadays, I feel like we're 10 years. We've advanced 10 years in one. I wanted to ask, so for the translators who feel overwhelmed by AI and these market changes, I would say, what are the top 3 tools you would recommend to use immediately? And we talked about, one of them is Perplexity AI, but what are, let's say, the top tools you would recommend to test in the upcoming period, and what is their value?
Yeah, that's a good one. Let's see here. I'm writing down some notes on ideas. I've got a lot of things
Yeah,
coming
no
to my
problem.
mind.
We can
But
compare our top three. So as you
yeah,
speak, I will also think about my top three.
right on. Well, I mean, the first one is Perplexity for research because it is fact checked. So it's like, it's so powerful. And now you can search social media on it, at least some social media, which is incredible. Like, this is very recent development. One that there's a lot of, so many I could recommend for different things, but for breadth, I'll recommend some things that are in different areas. Like, one thing that you can do as well is you can now dictate your translations instead of writing them on your keyboard. And typically we can speak 3 to 5 times faster than we can write. And the dictation tools are so good today that they make very few errors. And you can also train them on your own, like proper nouns, names of things and stuff. So dictation tools are one way that you can immediately start benefiting from AI. I recently did a workshop on all the best ones. There are like AI dictation tools that now you can give them custom instructions. So if you make a mistake or you say something twice, it'll automatically fix it. It can improve your style or change your style in various ways. It's pretty mind-blowing. But if you want to get your feet wet and just try one, you can go download Lily Speech for free, Lily Speech, Lily Speech. This is a dictation tool that's completely free and makes very, very few errors, and it's out of the box. So I used to teach Dragon Naturally Speaking many years ago. I feel like that was in a different century. That was in like 2015. But I don't teach it anymore because you don't need that. The AI learns from you very, very, very quickly, and it's exceptionally good at speech recognition in major languages. So you can go download Lily Speech. It's completely free. And you simply click the language you want to speak in, and you start speaking, and it will transcribe it on the screen. It works on any app in Windows. You can use it to dictate your emails in different languages. You can also use it for your translations. So you can dictate your translations instead of typing them out, or you can dictate your post edits if you are post editing. So that's already one way that you can start using it. Just be mindful, it uses the Google speech recognition. So you have to be mindful of confidentiality. Like, I wouldn't put like confidential data into there, but you have to use your judgment. So that's one tool you can go play with. I almost don't want to talk about ChatGPT because it's so easy to spend like hours just talking about ChatGPT. There's so much you can do, but here's another one that you can try again for breadth here. We were talking about research earlier. Perplexity is great because you can scan for stuff, but it has limitations. Like, it doesn't have direct access to YouTube, where it's going to find information within a YouTube video and like incorporate it meaningfully in its answer. It's going to find YouTube videos on the topic, but it's limited. It's not, to my knowledge anyway, it can't like scour actual videos. And for me, sometimes when I'm researching a translation project, I find a really helpful video. Let's say it's like an hour-long talk on YouTube just on the topic that I'm translating about. Well, there's a tool that will take that video and it'll transcribe all the text, and then you can directly speak with the video in a manner of speaking. And you can literally turn on the voice interaction, so you can have someone explain to you the content and you can ask questions about it, and it will answer you in real time and say like, oh, this is what this concept refers to. So let's imagine here you're building a glossary and you find a very, very relevant video that's an hour or 2 hours long. Well, within seconds, you can start speaking to it and say like, hey, I'm thinking about using this word. Is this really how people refer to it? Can you explain to me what this term means in this context a bit better? And it's going to really synthesize everything in that video and only that video. And it will then be able to give you answers. So the tool that does this for free, this is another Google tool. It's called Notebook LM. And you can have up to 50 sources. So you can put together like a repository of 50 different sources. They can be YouTube videos, they can be podcasts, they can be PDFs, they can be websites, they can be URLs of all kinds of things. So you pop that into Notebook LM, it will synthesize all that data, and then you can speak to it through a chat, or you can even turn on the audio feature where you can speak and have a conversation and ask questions. So I've been doing this because I'm addicted to books. I love, love, love books, but I don't have enough time to read. And I'm particularly interested in business topics that are more like for introverts, stuff I was talking about earlier. But there are so many books I want to read and I have so little time in my schedule. So one of the things I love to do is to gather a whole bunch of sources. Like right now I'm interested in the book 10x is easier than 2x by Dan Harris and his colleague. But I don't have time to read it. So what I can do is I can aggregate sources and put them into Notebook LM and have a conversation and say, hey, how could this apply to my business? So not only are you getting insights from your chosen sources, but you can also have it tailored to specific situations and have a conversation with it. It's actually a totally different way to consume information that's much more active, in fact. It's not just receiving information, I'm talking to the book. Pretty wild. So you can check that out. It's at NotebookLM. I think it's notebooklm.com. It's a free tool from Google. And whether it's for research or for gaining insights in various sectors, I find it's just a fascinating thing that you can play around with as well.
I love that. That's what I will be doing this Sunday, to check this out, because this sounds so cool.
Yeah, it's
and
really
like
something.
that I would definitely need to use both in my PhD research work, but also in other fields. So cool. So many cool tools that have already started to be available, and they're free. This is what I love about the AI tools, that most of them, if not all of them, offer a free subscription, which is great and so useful, because we can test many things and see what's most fitted for us. If I may, what I would say as well, what I've been using in the past 6 months. So first of all, it's so easy right now to link generative AI APIs to your CAT tool. So regardless of what that CAT tool is, nowadays there are so many platforms who offer their own LLM, so their own generative AI tool. So it's already embedded, so you can already compare it with your machine translation and with your glossary, so with your project terms. And I think that's really useful to compare, especially when the terminology is so different and you want to fact check it. So to have it in one tool, if you like to have everything in one tool, linking generative APIs to, for instance, like ChatGPT, I think the most common, Gemini, Microsoft Translator, these are the most popular ones. And I think any of your CAT tool would offer documentation on how to do it. I've also used the paid version this time, but Scholar AI by Google. I found it really interesting for the research space. So probably similar to Perplexity AI. It actually surprised me how quick you can find information online, especially in the research field. But also,
I hadn't heard about that one. Scholar
Yeah.
AI.
When you go to ChatGPT, it has an icon and you click on more GPTs, and then you have a bunch of GPTs you can test. You can have some really funny GPTs like astrology GPT or anything you might be interested in. So Scholar AI, I think it's similar with Perplexity, so works really well. Google has started to put more and more tools out there. I haven't tested them yet, but I will. And if you work, so in the medical field, I work also with some handwritten documents still. So still some of them, I would say some doctors in Romania or in other countries or maybe in Latin American countries still like to handwrite, and you really can't tell what those scribbles mean. I would say that ChatGPT has a really good handwriting reading techniques. So
interesting. I was not aware of that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes. Yeah. Even if you try to, I remember my mom, she was a teacher and she had this beautiful handwriting, but when she wrote notes to me, I couldn't get what she was saying. So I would have definitely very, very much used ChatGPT to decipher her handwriting. It was so fun because she was always on a rush, but really good. ChatGPT for handwriting is amazing. And dictation software, I couldn't appreciate that enough. I remember when I've done my internship in a French translation agency, I remember that the lady who had the translation agency, Patricia, was dictating her translations, her French into German translations, and I was so impressed. I was thinking, when will I get to that stage of dictating my translations? And she used to ship them to this company who was redacting them. So now we have free software for that. So yeah, amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's I'm hoping that I'd like to write more. After writing one book, I found it really very rewarding, and I'd like to write more. I'm thinking the next one I'm going to try to write it with an app that lets me dictate. And it's actually a long form dictation app, so you can just leave it on and dictate, and it will separate out what you said into paragraphs. It'll like figure out where to break up the paragraphs, and so it'll be interesting to experiment with that as well. I think dictation is a really underexploited AI benefit that not just translators, but all kinds of people can benefit from, but they often just don't really know that it exists yet.
Right on. Amazing. So speaking about AI and the future, the immediate future, because we're going 10 years, in 1 year at this pace, I wanted to ask you, Joe, where do you see the biggest opportunities for freelancers and small agency owners in the next 1 or 2 years when it comes to using AI, but also as a business? So where do you think that we're heading?
Right. I would say that most of the translators I know who are doing really well today are either highly specialized, and then the AI can help in all the different ways that we already discussed. In some cases, though, some people are adding new services to their arsenal. And in some cases, that can be a really beneficial thing. If you're very talented at writing blogs, why not add that to your services? I know one translator, she started offering writing services to her clients because she actually loved doing it. And she's now using AI in the process of writing, and she'll write it in both languages, in French and English. So she'll write newsletters for her clients. So she's using a lot of translation skills in there, right? Like that being diligent with the terminology and being, of course, writing impeccably, writing appealing texts. But she's using it in a new way and doing extremely well, and it's like booked out for months at a time. And lots of translators I know have added something. In some cases, it's been driven by fear. It's like AI is here. Shoot, should I offer a new service to my business just to like future proof? And of course, we don't want to do things from a place of fear. I don't think that's the answer. But in some cases, if you have a gift for something and you've never explored it before, maybe AI can be your opportunity to take that course, create that first video or that first blog, do that thing that you love doing, and just see if your existing translation clients might be interested. There are translators who do text formatting or graphic design. There are translators who do websites. They actually like creating the website. So I would say lots of translators I know who are doing well are really, doing exceedingly well during the age of AI because they're bundling services. And why is this valuable? It's not just because the client gets more stuff. It's the fact that the client gets more value because they can go to one person who's able to give them more of what they need. So it makes their life simpler to have one service provider, one brief. Let's go back to the example of my translator friend who writes like newsletters for clients, right? They no longer have to be like, okay, we're going to hire one person to write the newsletter in French, then we'll have to hire the translator in English, then we'll have to have this communications person in house, like do the last check, and then like send it out and everything. No, it's like, because this translator has become a one-stop shop, now they can just be like, oh, we want to do a newsletter on this topic. Boom, go. And she'll produce it in both languages and it's ready to publish. And it's like, it's not just about the services, it's that they're saving a lot of time and a lot of administrivia because they have one person who's able to get both things done. So it's like much less hassle. It's just like me. Like if I wanted to hire someone to edit my book, cool. But if they can edit and they can also do like the page layout, so all I need to do is hire them and then I can just like upload my manuscript to Amazon, of course I'm going to hire them. Of course, even if it costs more, because that's much less hassle than having to meet with service providers in different industries, get quotes, see if it works, test out the waters, then have to like do one step at a time, like first the revision and then like the typesetting, whatever. It makes so much more sense to work with one person who's able to offer complementary services. So I think this is a great opportunity to round out your services if you have another thing that you love to do. In my case, I love teaching. It just makes me very happy. It puts me in a good mood. I feel good after I teach, after I speak somewhere. And so I combined that with my translation career. And at first I was afraid that doing more than one thing would dilute my offer. But believe it or not, it's been the opposite, because my clients often tell me, we hired you to translate our speech because we know that you do a lot of talks. So we know, what it's like to be in front of people and speak and how people react. And we want to have like someone who's actually a speaker. We're not just going to go to anyone who has never spoken in public before. We want our speech translated by someone who does public speaking, right? Or in other cases, I'm thinking of like a mental health organization. They got back to me with a huge project. And I happened to ask them like, I know you have a lot of translators you work with all over the world. Can I ask you why you wanted to work with me? I'm just curious, like, for my own enlightenment, can you tell me why you hired me? And they were like, yeah, it's because we see that you're very active as a trainer. And these are training documents. and we want our translator to actually be in the field. It makes so much more sense to us than just going to anyone who has a Hotmail address. Like, why not hire a translator who's also a trainer, who's used to speaking to people in training settings, because that's what the text is all about. It's the presentation. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is that bundling services, I think, is a fantastic way to future-proof your business. Sometimes we do it from a place of fear today because of AI threatening us. But even for argument's sake, let's say we do it out of fear. Well, if you start exploring a passion, a sideline, and it doubles your business, or it gives you a mental break from translation, because it's hard to translate 8 hours a day, every day, 5 days a week. Like, maybe doing that other thing that you love to do could give you greater balance in your life, could be rewarding to you on a human level. So I think that this is another way forward, is to consider exploring something that you love, something that you're naturally good at. And why not hang out your shingle? Why not let your clients know that you can offer this now? And this is a great way you can build your business and become even more irreplaceable, because your client will now be going to you as a one-stop shop. And that makes you even more AI proof.
I love that. That's really good advice. And this way you can really tailor your services to your customers, because we all have such different customers and they have different needs, or you can adapt to what the market needs. If you work with translation agencies and you don't have so many direct customers, then maybe, acquiring a new skill is useful, like doing machine translation post-editing. It's so popular nowadays, or nowadays translation agencies are demanding linguists to, review the AI output. So that's another very interesting way to contribute if you are looking to expand your skills and learn more. There are so many courses out there, right? A lot of them are free, online. You can take paid courses. I'm sure they are very, very valuable. What do you think about that? And I wanted to ask you, related to this question, Joe, in North America, I'm curious, what is the market like at this moment? Are we looking for a lot of MTP, so machine translation post-editing? Is it still a lot of, translation work? What's the market like?
Right. So to your first point, it has never been easier in the history of humanity to pick up new skills and to market them. So this is one good thing that we can be thankful for. There's lots of problems in the world today. AI also causes a lot of fear, but we can be thankful of this one thing, that we have incredible access to quality education in order to further our skills and to be able to market those skills effectively. Like for me, I often wait for the sales on Udemy. I bought, I think, hundreds of courses on Udemy at this point. And some of them are just scratching the surface. Some of them are really good. Some of them are bad. I've taken Udemy courses that were just bad. But most of them have been good, and some of them have been excellent. And a lot of them are certified. Like, you can get a certificate. You can go to HubSpot and do all kinds of free training and get certificates. Some people have built their entire career, successful 6-figure careers, just by taking courses on HubSpot for free. Because people know, you have to pass a little test at the end when you do a HubSpot certification, and there are hot topics where there's a lot of demand. So I would definitely encourage people so much to maybe do some journaling. I love journaling personally, but do some journaling on, like, what do I love to do? What lights me up? And then you can just poke around and be curious about what's up on Udemy today. Udemy. There are lots of courses that are really inexpensive, almost nothing. Check out the courses on HubSpot. And of course, there are countless other courses out there. I just picked up a $99 copywriting course that's like the #1 recommended copywriting course by major industry players. See if I can find the link and put it in the show notes if you want. I'll see if I can find it. I think it's the Copywriter Kickstart course or something like that. And I'm not even taking it because I want to do copywriting. I just think that as a translator, it's good to take courses in other fields to learn new things and explore. But my point is, at the end of that course, they guarantee that if you do the work, you have a portfolio by the end and you have the certification. And it's like, it would not take a lot of time to gain those extra skills and start to market yourself in copywriting, which is super close to translation. So I definitely encourage people to check out all the great stuff that's out there. And then the other question is, what does the market look like? I know that the DeepL 2024 report, so their international report from last year, indicated that 98% of LSPs were using MTPE. So basically, like 98% of translation that's done by agencies anyway is, pre-translation by machine that's then being revised by humans. So there's not a lot of translation left where it's from scratch. I don't think that should scare anyone, though. First of all, we're used to it, but also you can decide that you don't use it. And if you do, I would lean into it 100% and say, I'm the human translator. I don't use any AI. When you work with me, it's like human quality translation 100% of the time, guarantee, and you develop a seal or something. And there are freelance and boutique agencies that do this. They position themselves as the human-only option at the upper end of the market. And they do extremely well because they only get clients that are willing to pay for human only. That's a very effective positioning. Do I think every translator should do that? No. I think that there are also translators who say, I use machine translation so that you get your translation faster. And for them, they prefer it because they don't like drafting. Like it takes forever to draft a 10,000 word translation. But with AI, you can draft it really quite quickly and then get to review. In other words, I think there's more than one way that you can stand out and be effective on the market today. Just if people are curious about where things are at, if we base ourselves on DeepL, like if they are to be believed, and they did a pretty wide-ranging survey, 98% of agencies are using machine translation. And in my experience, like translation departments within companies across North America, like they are largely using AI as well. There are a few stragglers, but most of them are like, they're starting to get used to the idea that this is the industry standard now. If you want to keep up, you're expected to work at a certain pace. And so I think very, very few of them are going towards human only. But again, that can work. It's just really, I think you don't want to be wishy-washy. If you use it, don't be afraid to tell clients how it benefits them. And if you don't use AI because you're human only, don't be afraid to stand up on the rooftops and shout that you're doing human only translation and here's why, and here's why it's premium. I think both are totally legit. It's just finding which approach works for you, and you don't want to be caught in the messy middle. You want to try to position yourself strongly and clearly, and markets like clarity. So the more you can be clear about your service offer, what you have to offer, your proposal, your unique sales proposition, if you will, the more effective you will be, and you will attract the right kinds of people to you.
I love that. Very clear and very well positioned. Thank you for sharing, Joe. And we do see the same in Europe, I would say. Even if you look at the assignments that come in through pros, it's only MTP, but using CAT tools for so many years, it's just easy, right? I think for translators to do that if they want to position themselves that way. Or in my field, because I do a lot of, I think 90% of my work is certified legal translation and 10% is certified medical translation. So in that field, I position myself as human only, using AI, of course, but they wouldn't go to someone else because they are afraid about, first of all, the privacy policy. Again, there is some education needed there when it comes to security and AI, but just because my customers want premium services, so I work with a lot of the law firms as well, so there's, I think, plenty of room on the market for everyone. Okay, well, Joe,
Absolutely.
This has been mind-blowingly inspiring and insightful for us. I think there is so much value every listener segment can take from this podcast episode. So I just want to thank you for the level and depth of the information you shared and your expertise. It is really, really valuable, and I hope all of you who are listening, you found this insightful. Maybe even listen to it 2 or 3 times or pause it. Thank goodness that it is on YouTube and on the major podcasting platforms so that we can pause and take notes. This is one of those episodes. Joe, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And before I go, I want to mention to listeners, if you'd like, you can grab my swipe file of answers to clients who are looking for an AI discount, as I call it. So we'll provide that in the show notes. And also, if you want to go grab my book, it's up on Amazon.com, $4.97, so it won't break the bank. It's called AI Resilient, and it's packed with other strategies and complementary information, things you can apply today to build your translation or interpreting business effectively in the age of AI.
I love that, Joe. I will add the link in the video description. I read Joe's book. I highly recommend it. It had a lot of aha moments for me. So I won't spoil, I won't spoil the info, and I'll let you read through it. I'll also add Joe's links, so his website and his social media profile, so that you can follow him and get in touch with him. As always, if you like this episode, please subscribe to my channel. This means that it will bring more visibility and more translators and interpreters can see it. And it is now, starting September, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Music. So please follow me there and rate it. It is really important. So thank you for listening, everybody. And thank you, Joe, one more time.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.